All right, you guys, I'm back. I'm really sorry about that. Looks like I'm going to have to call my internet provider. All right, let me check what you guys said. Okay, Logan says, talking about the note in the bottom screen. Okay, so, let's see if you guys are jumping in before I start. Let's see what this ends up like. It's crazy because literally no one in my house is using the internet right now. I was alone the entire time, which shouldn't be happening. So, all right, you guys. So back into this. I was talking about the notes down here that when you click this object up here in the object panel, this README, that it allows you to. Yay! Okay, everyone's back. What's up, guys? Sorry about that. Let's hope it doesn't happen again. Fingers crossed. Okay, please. I need all of your luck right now. Angela just crashed. I have no idea why it happened. I think I'm having issues with my internet, which I need to call my provider tomorrow, which I'm going to get on right away. But so you want to read these notes that Belle wrote here, or you want to add additional notes into here, you can just click this object. Now, I was talking about when I think it crashed, the let's see here real quick. Let's move this down. Perfect. When right before it crashed, I was talking up here about the studio objects and how you have your stage and your lights and everything all set up. Now these have protection tags right here. These are your little protection tags, these little like kind of blocked symbols, right? Like no go, no trespassing. Um, these are there for your safety in this project, right? So I put these are placed on these objects so that you can't move them around accidentally. Now, this little button right here is basically allows you to look in the camera and look out of the camera. As animators and people that work in the computer generated images business, we essentially have to be our own directors as well. And so knowing about cameras is important. We don't really touch base a lot in this class as much, but if you guys feel like taking a film class later, would be beneficial. But we have a camera set up in our scene, right? Because we have to manually set these things up. They don't just automatically appear in our projects. These things are things that you have to put together and essentially assemble on your own. Well, when I'm looking through this camera, when this button right here is turned on, when it's highlighted in white, I am unable to use my camera move tools, which again are when you click down one, that allows you to move. When you hold down two, that allows you to pan in and out or zoom in and out of your shot. And I'm sorry, dollying, not panning, but dollying in and out of your shot. And then three allows you to rotate around your objects, right? But when I click those right now, I can't do that. And that's because this camera view is locked. And so if I want to look outside of this camera view, I just click off of this, turn this little icon off, and then that allows me to go ahead, click, drag, and move around my scene. In fact, right now I'm selected on the camera. I don't want that. I want to click off of the camera. If I need to do that, you just click off anywhere in here, and that'll allow you to unselect your object, right? And so when I go to do this now, holding down one and clicking and dragging, I can move around my scene. I can dolly in and out of my scene, and I can rotate my scene. But so if I get all sorts of crazy like this, right, that's okay. Because my shot is still set up. Now, when you guys are actually going to animate this bouncing ball, I recommend that you stay in this camera view, because you don't want to accidentally bring the ball up and out of the camera view. You don't want it to go beyond the top of the screen right here. You want it to stay within the view of the camera. So I really highly recommend working within this view, right? Like you're looking through the camera lens. And you can just shut this off to mess around with it, or look maybe later at what your animation looks like, not through the camera. But in the meantime, just while you guys are working, I would just take this studio, which is like a folder, right? This is essentially your how do I want to say, your folder that is containing all of these objects, the studio folder. And there's a little icon right there, and you can furl this folder up by just clicking that icon. Same with the ball, right? So our ball has one as well. But when you're going to animate the ball, you don't have to unfurl and click on the geometry axis. You don't have to touch that at all, actually. You can just grab the ball and move these access points right there when you're clicked on this object. Okay, so just make sure that when you go to start this project that you're selected on the ball itself, right? And we're not able to move the platform here because that is within our studio folder, and that folder, everything in that folder is locked up. Okay, so let's kind of get started doing the animation, right? We're going to essentially do the very same thing that we did in Adobe After Effects, except this time it's going to look a little different on our timeline, right? We talked about navigating inside of Cinema 4D last week, and one of those things we discussed was the timeline down here. And so if I click this little, right, keyframe, now you guys know what that little diamond name is. If I click that little keyframe, all of a sudden my timeline shows up here. And I can make this timeline a little bit bigger by just clicking, dragging right here. And we happen to be in the dope sheet view, right? We talked about this. There's also dope sheet view in Cinema 4D, as well as having one inside of After Effects. And then we also have an F-curve mode right here. So if I were to click on this, this would bring me into my F-curve mode, which you're not going to see anything right now because we don't have any keyframes on the timeline, right? But we're basically going to be doing the same thing. We're going to start this ball up at a certain point. We're going to bring this down, and then we're going to animate it back up. And then we're going to add the squash and stretch into it, right? Now, when I select this ball, and when I grab these access points, if you guys look over into this panel, the attributes panel, and you look over here in these transform properties, these are also very similar to what we have in After Effects, except we have an additional coordinate, right? We talked about the colors of these coordinates. We talked about Y is always green, X is always red, and blue is, or Z axis is always blue. And that principle translates over all of your softwares, right? So this never is something that never changes across softwares, which is really nice. So you know that in After Effects to Cinema 4D to Blender to anything like that, these color combinations are always going to represent the same thing on your access points. Now over here, back to this area in your attributes panel. Let me zoom over here real quick. You have your position right here. So you have an X, Y, and Z position, right? And notice that these dimensions are, oops, sorry, didn't mean to do that. These dimensions are already separated for you. So I don't have to go here and click and separate the dimensions. I can have individual control over each of these dimensions automatically. Same with the rotation, which is right here, and the scale, S for scale, right? You can't just bring these up by hitting those letters like, you know, P, T, R, whatever. You can't really bring this up like this. You have to click on the object, and then you can hit the RT to allow them to change your, right, you can change the access point and what it does. So T is scaling, right? But let me go back to my position. When we start off, everything's at 0. So I'm just going to go ahead and type in 0 there. We have a question in the chat. For the animate part of the project, do you want us to give the ball a stripe pattern, or can I be all one color as long as it is a color? Yeah, you can do that if you want to. In the Adobe Animate project, you don't have to, it doesn't have to be exactly the same color wise or design wise, just as long as it fits within your color palette and your design, right? That's what I'm most looking for. All right, now back to this. Let's go ahead, and before we start putting keyframes down into our scene, we want to check to make sure that our scene is set up appropriately, right? We need to be working, like always, in 24 FPS and 1920 by 1080 as far as resolution goes. When you open up a new project inside of Cinema 4D, it defaults to 30 frames a second, because that's just, it works for animation. 30 frames a second isn't horrible for animation. It still looks good, but just traditionally and what we are used to in the industry, and it's, changing as it goes, but what we do in this class is 24 frames a second. So Cinema 4D, you can find it if you just search on your computer. In your search bar, you just type Maxon or Cinema 4D, and it should come up for you to open the software for you, Angel. But you have to have it downloaded and stuff on your computer. All right, so in order to update the frames per second for this project, we have to go into the project settings, and you change this by hitting Control D on your keyboard. And let me type that in for you guys so you can see. Control plus D equals project settings. And that is inside of Cinema 4D. Okay. And when you do that down here in the attributes panel, you get the option to change these as needed, right? And so it looks like we're already at 24 frames a second. It's probably because the project was saved at 24 frames a second, and this was already updated for us. So you won't have to change that. But here, what we can do is we can update the timing, right? So the time max is in frames versus when we're inside of After Effects and we have the time code and where we can enter in the time code. It's not the same inside of Cinema 4D. It counts it in frames. But what's cool is that everything inside of Cinema 4D and these little options can do the math for you. So if I want this project to be, let's say, 5 seconds long, like my other project, I just have to type in 24, which is my frame amount, right? That's my frames per second. 24 times 5 seconds, and it'll add it to 120 frames. And so then I am set to the appropriate amount of frames within my project. And you can see that update right down here. At the bottom, it will tell you right here and here, kind of like this general area, that your frame count has changed. And so we'll just click off of that, and that will automatically save for us. And then I want to check it in my render settings too. We're going to get familiar with this a lot in this class. And so this little kind of folder up at the top, it's actually a what do they call them, a slate. A slate is what they use in film when they say action and they snap that shut, right? It's in order to sync up audio with visuals. And the slate with the little cog or the little gear in there is your render settings. And this is your output, right? This is how we determine what's going to export out of our project. And so when you go into your render settings, you're going to see this output option. And this is the first thing you want to click right here. And you want to make sure that this is 1920 by 1080. It will default to standard definition. So you're going to have to change this most likely on other projects. This one should be all set for you. Resolution is fine to stay at 72 dpi. We're not printing this, so we don't have to worry about that. But the other thing that you want to make sure is that it says frame range is all frames. So it's going to render out every single one of my frames that I have animated on here, because sometimes it's on current frame, which will mean it only exports one image, and we don't want that. We want it to do all frames, and you'll want to make sure you change these settings every time you start a new project inside of Cinema 4D. Did you click create or animate? I'm not sure. Wait, question, where's Cinema 4D? Did you click create or animate? Angel, I don't know if you're in the right program, because there's not like you just open up the template that you download from Canvas, and it should be like this right away. It should have these objects in it, and everything should be set up for you. So back to the render settings here. We've determined that we're at the 1920 1080 and that we're going to render our entire animation, all the frames that we have, which will be 5 seconds long, which equates to 120 frames. If we click down on this save option here, we can change where these images, right? Because it's going to output a bunch of images for us. And I'm going to go into my bouncing ball project folder, into my 3D folder, and to PNG sequences, because that's where I want this to save when I go to export it out. And then you want to make sure that alpha channel is clicked. Always, always, always alpha channel, your transparency. This is very important, because if you do not add the transparency, you will have a black background. And this is important because we are going to be bringing this project into After Effects to composite the bouncing ball with, please check my license. Okay, hold on, you guys. This week is an interesting week, is it not? Let's see here. Quite the technical difficulties. Yes. Hold on one second. Let me just activate my license back up. Update later. All right. 1 second, you guys. So, can't believe this is happening. Let's do this again. Open up Cinema 4D. Maxon. Maxon. Cinema 4D. It should just open it. I need to go into my project, into here to open this back up. Should automatically update my license. There we go. Just took it a second to think. All right. So just a quick thing for you guys to understand what happened there. With Cinema 4D, with Adobe, you get the opportunity to use the license, I think, on more than one computer. I think you can have up to 2 computers where you have, the software downloaded and the license works for both. With With Cinema 4D, you unfortunately only have the ability to use it on one computer at a time. So if you're using it on a different computer, and have it licensed on there, you have to release the license. I can always show you guys how to do that later, but that's kind of what happened to me just there. So jumping back into this, because I want to be mindful of your guys' time, we directed it where it needs to save. We want to make sure we have that alpha channel so we don't end up with a black background when we render this out. The other thing you want to make sure is that you're exporting as a PNG, right? If you export as JPEGs and stuff, those don't have transparency layers. PNGs do. So we just want to make sure we're at the PNG. And then when you're done, all you have to do is click off and it will save that for you. So let's bring this up here. We've made sure our project settings are correct. Let's drag that up. Let's bring our dope sheet up. You want to make sure that you save this project. File, save project as. And you can either just save it as that or you can save it with your last name at the front so that you can always have this one to reference if you ever want to do it later. And I just put this reset there and save it in the same spot. And so the first thing we want to do is come up here to our objects panel and grab this ball and make sure that we hit E on the keyboard so that we have the move option selected for our ball. And when we select that ball, we want to make sure that down here in the attributes panel, we click on the coordinates tab, and that'll allow us to see those transform properties right here. And inside our timeline, you have a playhead, right? Which we also have inside of After Effects. We want to drag that playhead to the very beginning, and it will say 0 right next to it. You'll notice that number changes when you drag it along your timeline. But we're going to start at 0, and we are going to bring this ball up on our y-axis, just like we did in After Effects. In fact, I'm going to type in an even number here because specifically inside of Cinema 4D, even numbers will be your friend. So 575 looks pretty good. Now, when you want to keyframe something inside of Cinema 4D, it works differently than keyframing something inside of After Effects. In Cinema 4D, you have to record the change by clicking these little diamonds next to the property that you're changing, right? And these little diamonds show up on all sorts of different properties within this attributes panel, because you can animate a ton of different options, right? But whenever you make a change, you have to click this again, right? So I've recorded it, it turns red. And then all of a sudden, now I have keyframes down here, right? The keyframes look a little bit different. You can click and drag them and move them around as well. This starts to get a little bit confusing because of the way that the keyframes stack within Cinema 4D's timeline. And you guys will see once we start to add in here the squash and stretch into our ball bounce. But we'll worry about that in just a second. In the meantime, I'm going to drag this over to 12 frames, keeping in mind that we did about 1 second per bounce with the other ball. So we're going to do the same thing here. And we are going to click that ball again. And we're going to put this down at 0 because 0 was directly on our platform. And then again, like I said, what happens is when you make a change to an object that has already been recorded, it will turn yellow to notify you, hey, you've changed the parameter here. Do you want to record it? You will have to click manually to say yes, right? If I were to come over here and make a change and then move forward, it doesn't record that change for you. So you have to actually manually press it inside of Cinema 4D. But now what happens is we have the ball dropping down. And so we're going to move another 12 frames forward to our 24 frame 24th frame, which is 1 second. And instead of retyping in the 575 and recording it here, we're actually going to we're going to copy this keyframe over here like we did before. Now, when copying keyframes inside of Cinema 4D, you actually have to hold down the Control button and click and drag it on your timeline, right? You can't actually hit Control C, Control V. It doesn't work that way. You have to select the keyframe or group of keyframes that you want to copy, and you hold down the Control button and you click and you drag. Okay, I'm going to remove those keyframes there. But if I go like this, we have a ball bouncing, right? Cool. Except this ball obviously doesn't look correct, right? Because we have to have this ball accelerate down to the ground and decelerate on the bounce back up, just like we did with the ball inside of After Effects. When you figuring out the frame movement part of Cinema 4D took me almost an hour. Yeah, are you talking about inside of here, Efren? Or are you talking about moving the keyframes? Because these are tricky, right? What you'll notice is if you hover over the keyframe, you will get a little notification on what that keyframe value is. So holding it over here, I can see that my value is 575 centimeters, and then moving it over here, it's at 0 centimeters, right? So you can kind of hover your mouse over these options and you'll be able to see what the values are. You can also, over here in the side of your dope sheet, and same with your F-curve view when we get into that, you have your objects that have keyframes on them. And so if you select this object and you use the drop-down menu, it allows you to look at your specific parameters or transform properties that are keyframed here. Yeah, the keyframes are difficult. They are. But notice when I unfurl this, it shows all these keyframes, right? These have to do with your value that you're actually keyframing, or which what do I want to say? Direction coordinate. That's what I want to say. Which coordinate you're keyframing. Because if you look here, the ones that are highlighted are green, which indicate that I've keyframed just my Y axis. It would show blue or red if I had the Z or the X axis keyframed on here. So let's change the easing of this ball right now. And we're going to jump right into the F-curve mode, which is like our graph editor, right? F-curve graph editor is this little button right down here. And if you click on that, crazy, right? If this were linear, wouldn't they be straight lines? Yes, the answer is, the short answer is yes. Inside of Cinema 4D, it automatically tries to ease your animation for you. So it automatically adds the easing. This easing obviously needs to be adjusted so that we have the acceleration on the way down, deceleration on the way up. But you can change your different types of easing by clicking these little buttons right here as well, which allow you to update the type of easing. So if I wanted these keyframes to be linear, I can just hover my mouse over this and say, oh, that's linear. If I were to click on that, they become straight lines, right? We don't want that. Obviously, we want to update the easing here, but there's just some shortcuts here in case you do ever need to use different types of keyframes. And so what we need to happen, so we need this ball to hit right here. And then it's going to be doing the same thing. So we want the ball in After Effects, right? We need it to go fast down here. So we need this curve to kind of be steep going down. The graph editor inside of Cinema 4D is a little bit different. It's like flipped to the appropriate, how do I want to say, like dimension as far as like what you're looking at on screen will also be similar to what you see in your graph, right? So instead of like in After Effects where our curve was like this, or no, it should be the same here. Actually, let me grab this keyframe right there. I'm gonna undo this. Again, grabbing keyframes, clicking and dragging over the keyframe. Some of you will end up, if you use your mouse wheel, you can kind of scroll to zoom in and out of your animations right here, your curve, right? So you can see it at different angles. Sometimes you guys will end up super zoomed in on this and you're like, oh no, where's everything, right? If you just hover your mouse over the graph and you hit H on your keyboard, it will just reset that graph for you so that you guys can see that entire curve. And it resets and re-angles everything for you. If you hold down, I think you can click on also in here one. If you click and hold one within the graph editor, same with the dope sheet view, and you drag, you can move left and right or up and down. So it moves. If you hold down two and click and drag, similar just how you use the camera up here in this scene, right? It's going to zoom in and out. And then three, you can't rotate this, right? So the rotating is out of the question. But if you wanted to get back to this all zoomed in and nice and centered, you just hit that H. I'm going to drag and click on this center keyframe where the ball is at the platform. And in order to change this Bezier handle, we have to break it so that this side doesn't move along with this side when I move it. Because right now they're tied together. So when I move one side, it moves the other. In order to do that, you hold down Control on your keyboard. I thought it was Control. Hold on, maybe it's not. Let me see here. Not Control, Alt. Nope. Shift. Shift. Okay. Holding down Shift. Let me type that out for you guys. Click plus Shift equals break Bezier handles on curves. So you guys can put that into your notes. That'll be an important one. And then the click plus one equals move. Click plus 2 equals zoom. And this is on your graph, right? This is inside of your dope sheet view or your F curve view on your timeline. All right, just enough time for you guys to screenshot that. And then I am going to get out of that. And so we've broken this handle. Now I want to accentuate this curve so that I have a fast acceleration on the way down. Okay. Just holding down, if you hold down Control, it locks your Bezier handle in place when you drag, so you can't go up or down, right? We don't want to do that. We want to have it nice and straight. I'm going to do that bit there, and then we're going to, let me hit H, select that middle one, and we're going to pretty much try and get the curve on the other side just the same. So in order to visually kind of line up these curves from one side to the other, what I'm using is the graph inside of the lines, essentially. All these little lines that you see vertically, horizontally inside of here. I use as like a visual point on where maybe I need to put my Bezier handles to line things up, right? So on this one, I'm like 1 3/4 away from the second frame here. So I'm just going to move this one to about the same. And then with this one, our last keyframe here, I'm going to drag this one out until it's about, let's see here, how much was this one? It's got to be further. I know it is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 frames. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 frames. So right around this 18th frame. Oh, perfect. Holding down Control, clicking and dragging. So now when I play this animation, your play buttons, by the way, are down here. Okay. So when I play this, we have a ball that accelerates to the ground and decelerates on its way back up. My little kitty Minerva is here saying hello to all of you guys. Sorry you can't see her. She's by my feet just yelling at me. But we have a ball with really nice acceleration and deceleration, right? Well, that's the perfect start. We blocked out the animation. Now we fine-tuned it. Well, now we need this animation to happen. We need this bounce to happen a few more times, right? And so actually, before I copy and paste those keyframes, let's do that right now. Let's copy and paste the keyframes. Let's kind of zoom out of this so I can see. Come on. There we go. A little bit more of my graph. And I'm going to select all of these keyframes right here. Just clicking and dragging. And I'm going to remember we do not want to add these keyframes over here, right? We want to make sure that our first keyframe and our last keyframe match up. And so I'm going to Control, click and drag and make sure that this section of keyframes lines up right here. In fact, you could just click these ones and copy and paste them as well if you want to do the math. But you definitely don't have to. You can just select these three, move over here, Control, click and drag, right? So we've got 1, 2, 3. We want to have at least 4 bounces, right? 4. We have enough for 5 because we have 5 seconds in our timeline. So let's move down this way and copy and paste it one more time. Control dragging. Control clicking and dragging allows those to copy and paste. All right, so now if I play it, I will have 5 bounces that loop perfectly. Okay. So let's go ahead and add the squashing and stretching to this ball, similar to how we would do it before. So I'm going to grab the ball, and over here in my coordinates panel, we are going to want to animate. In order to do the squash and stretch, right, we animated the scale last time, so we're going to want to animate the scale this time. Now, when we do the scale, we talked about when you're squashing and stretching an object, it's important to remain the same as far as volume of the object goes, or mass of the object, right? And so when we took away from one number, right, when we did the x, let's do this here. When we said the x before would equal 120, we had to make sure that the y would equal 80, right? Because we added 20% to the scale of the x, so we needed to deduct 20% from the scale of the y. Well, we have to also anticipate that we're going to be doing that for a third dimension here, right? Because now we have a third coordinate, which is that z coordinate. And so when we're going to animate the scale to do the squash and stretch, it looks like our x coordinate is what's going to give us that squashing, right? And then the z or the y is going to give us that stretching. We just have to make sure that we're also accounting for the z, which would be the space. If I go back here, don't look at my camera, move this around right here. The z-axis is going to be the depth of your object, right? So let's just reset these. I think if you Control click on these, Alt click, Shift click, one of them resets it. Oh, that's not it. Undo that. I think I did it on accident on this one. Anyways, we'll go back to 1. Everything starts at a 1-1 scale. Sorry about that, you guys. I didn't mean to confuse you there. Let's look back through our camera. Unfurl that. Click on our ball. And everything starts at a 1-to-1 scale here inside of your transform properties. And so we're going to start with that 1-to-1 scale, that 100% on all of your properties right away here at the 0, at your 0 frame. You want to make sure that you're bringing your, let's do this here so we can see the scale. You bring your playhead all the way to the beginning of the timeline, and then you set that scale, all 3, the X, Y, and Z coordinates to 1, 1, 1, right? Because that's our 100% value that we have there. And now when we bring this down to where it's supposed to fully squash on the ground, we talked about this last class that as this ball is going to accelerate down, it's going to stretch, but we want to kind of work backwards here. And so we're starting with the major changes, and then we'll get that stretching happening in between there after we've got the squash down. And so when it hits the ground is when you want that squash to occur. And so we're going to, let's change this to 1.5 and see how much it stretches out. That looks good. And so we're just going to deduct 0.5 from both the y and the z. So 0.5, 0.5. Well, that kind of looks a little funky, doesn't it? Let's see. When we look through, actually, I'm sorry. So instead of deducting it from the z plane, the z and the x axis have to be linked as far as the value of what it needs to be, right? Because here, let me turn my camera on. It's better if I explain it like this. When you squash an object, right? Let's say we take this ball and we're squishing it down right there. It both expands out on your x-axis and then on your z-axis. That depth of it is going to expand at the same, it's going to like squish down in the same direction versus the y, which is going to get skinnier like this, right? And so what I did wrong there is I deducted from this z-axis when the z and the x-axis should be the same values because it's squashing down, and those need to stay the same on both the depth, right, and the width. Versus the only thing that's really changing for us is the y, the like height of the object. And so let me shut my camera back off here. I'm going to actually change this number to 1.5. There we go. That looks better, right? That looks appropriate. But we've made these changes, but I haven't recorded them yet. Okay, you guys, this is going to take a minute to get used to. When it's yellow, warning, fellow. Okay, we want to make sure that we lock this in, lock these keyframes in. It's not as easy as it is in After Effects where you don't have to do anything different, right? And so we're going to move up to the 24 frame, and we want to essentially copy this 111 scale because we want it to go back up to the full shape of the object before. So in order to make sure I'm grabbing the right one, I'm just going to hover over these keyframes, right? It's starting to look a little complex, but if you hover over these and take your time, you're like, oh, here is my scale one. I'm going to click that one, and I'm going to hold down Control, and I'm going to drag it over here, right? So now we have the same, it's starting off in one solid shape. It's going to squash down here, and then it's coming back up to the solid shape. Well, now we need to add that stretching in. And so we're going to start back where the ball is fully squished on the ground here. And we're going to move back probably 2 or 3 keyframes. Let's move back 3. And we're going to add that stretching in, right? So we're going to change the values of the ball scale going to click right back up here on the ball. And so let's start it back. Let's actually make this easy for us, right? We're going to grab this 111 scale transform of the ball, and we're going to click and drag. We're going to control and drag over here to copy it, so that when we come over to our coordinates attributes panel over here, we're starting at one solid number there, and then we can make the changes based on this. So don't keep it at the 111, right? This is our stretch, so we need to update these numbers. It's just to start at an even number, so it's not some weird decimal. And so now we want to elongate that ball, and we're going to do that the same amount that we did before. So it's we deducted 0.5 before to the y, so we're going to add 0.5 to the y. So it's going to be 1.5. And then we're actually going to deduct 0.5 from the x and the z axis, right? 0.5. So that it gives us this nice elongated shape. And then we are going to record that change. Okay, you guys? So we have this ball starting up. It's going to stretch down, and then it's going to smush on the ground. And then we want to make sure that we're copying this keyframe in the same spot. So 3 frames away from your floor position, right? So we're going to go in the opposite direction. So we're going to move 1, 2, 3 frames with our playhead. And we're going to copy and paste these scale keyframes here of the stretch. Okay, so we have even, it's happening. It's like a mirrored mirrored motion from one side to the other side. The exact same thing is happening. Well, when we drag this over here, what I'm noticing is that my squashing is happening in the air, right? That doesn't make any sense. The squashing should be occurring when the ball hits the platform, not in the middle of the air. It doesn't like preemptively squash. It needs to come into contact with something in order to do that. And so, what I'm realizing here is that maybe I need to update my position keyframes to add a section where the ball stays on the ground for a certain amount of time. For that squashing and stretching to occur, that ball's going to stay here on the ground. And it's going to allow for that ball to come all the way down, hit the platform, and squash on the platform, and not pre-squash, right? And so since I have to update my keyframes for my position property of the ball, I want to delete all of these ones that I copied and pasted, because they're no longer going to be the same, right? We are going to have to make sure that these are all the same in order to create a seamless loop. And once we make a change to this section of the first bounce, all of these will be different. And so I'm just going to grab all of these keyframes, delete them. I have some more over here. I'm just going to move over here and grab the rest of these position keyframes and delete these guys too. I'm going to move back here. And we're going to jump into our F-curve view. And right over here, actually, we're going to go back to the dope sheet. Let's do this first. We're going to make sure we grab our position keyframes right here. And I am going to actually control, drag, and copy. We don't want to grab all of them, just the ones in the center, which are, I just want to grab this position keyframe right here, right? This one right here. And I want to hit control, and I'm going to copy and drag this right over here where the stretch is. And then I'm going to take this center one and I'm going to move this one over here. So through this area right here, the ball should be at 0, 0. If we click our ball and we go to our attributes panel over here, and we look at this value, when I move from frame 9 to frame 15, it should remain 0. And it doesn't. We have some changing happening here. So let's manually do this change, right? So I'm going to delete this here just because I don't want it to confuse you guys. Let's bring this down to the floor position where it needs to be. And then we're going to move the playhead to the 15th frame. We're going to select this ball again, and then we're going to make sure we change this back to 0. And we're going to keyframe that. We're going to lock that in. So now this whole part should be, I think what's happening is it's selecting, the changes are happening. Let's see here. We're just going to troubleshoot this issue right now. So when I bring my playhead to 0 frames, it should be 575 on my position on my y-axis. When I bring it here, it should be at 0. Perfect. When I bring it here, there should be no change, which is where the issue is occurring. Right here, it should be 0, and then back up here should be 575. All right. Let's look at, let's see where the issue is. Okay. The ball position. I know where the issue is actually. It's right here. It's in my curve. I didn't think about that for a second. Kind of caught me off guard. Because we already had our curves updated, when I changed that keyframe, it changed the curve shape right here in between my 2 0 frames where I should be stuck on the floor. And so I need to update the way the curve looks. So I'm going to hit H on my keyboard so I can bring this in here. And we actually want this section between these 2 keyframes, just like we did last class with After Effects, to be flat. Okay, and so I'm going to take this Bezier handle and I am going to undo that and then hold down Shift and 1 keyframe at a time. So grab this one first. I had 2 selected. You want to make sure you grab one at a time. I'm going to bring this in, and then I'm just going to hold down Control and just drag this all the way to where the keyframe is, making sure that this line doesn't go below the frame, doesn't go below that keyframe. And then we're going to grab this keyframe right here. And this one's already nice and flat. That's perfectly fine. I can drag this, holding down Shift, click and drag this in if I want to. And then we want to break this keyframe and make it actually do that nice deceleration back up, right? So I'm going to hit H on my keyboard so I can see this again. And we're going to compare these curves now. So this one I'm going to bring to about the, let's do the 6th frame again. And about 500 right here on my graph, I can see there. I'm going to do the same to this one. So bring it up to about 500 and then out to about 18. Right. And then I'm going to grab these, or actually this one was, how many did this one go in? 1, 2, 3. So we want to do the same with this one. From here, perfectly lined up with my keyframe. 1, 2, 3 sections from the keyframe up to about that 500 mark. There we go. So we get that even look on both sides, right? And then both of the curves, the last keyframe and the first keyframe are still appropriately adjusted. The curves of both are. It was really this center section that we needed to flatten out. So there is no change happening here in between the 9th frame and the 15th frame when the ball's on the ground and squashing, right? And so now when we play this, the ball's going to accelerate to the ground. It's going to squash when it hits the ground, and it's going to then start to stretch on its way up and decelerate on the way up. All right, so we have stretching, 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 hits the ground, squashes on the ground, bounces off of the ground, right? That momentum from that squash is going to reverse itself to build up that momentum to shoot back up in the air. Perfect. But we want to adjust the scale curves as well. for the ball. So I'm going to go back into my dope sheet view. Ball has the squash and stretch scale right there. I'm going to select the scale keyframes, and then I'm going to go into my F curve view. And similar to the curves that we actually saw last time in class during the After Effects one, we're going to just grab these. Actually, they're all selected. You can tell when they're all yellow. So you just click and drag all of these. And we're just going to accentuate. Holding down Control, we can drag these curves out without, let me center this here, without accidentally going up or down, right? Holding that Control down kind of locks that into place. So I'm going to grab that and drag those out. And now when we play it, it's got a nice bouncy looking squash that's happening there. And so now that we have the whole entire animation fine-tuned and looking really good, now is when we can duplicate everything. So we're going to just zoom here out of our timeline a little bit so we get a view of the entire area. This is the playback view right here. This little light gray option. If you grab this there and you drag this back and forth, that's going to be like your play area. You want to make sure that that's at 120 frames because that's going to be your full 5 seconds. And you want to click and drag all of these keyframes, holding Control, and then you want to copy them. So I'm going to bring my playhead to the last set of keyframes. I'm going to hold down Control, click and drag. We're going to do that again right here, making sure that we're in line with the last set of keyframes, holding down Control, click and drag. And then finally, we will do it one more time to get a total of 5 bounces, nice squashy and stretchy bounces. So when I play this, I've got this perfectly looping bouncing ball inside of Cinema 4D. Now, one of the things you guys might notice the difference between what you had to do with Cinema 4D versus After Effects is before we had to manually change the anchor point. This anchor point of the ball has been changed for you, right? You can see that the anchor point sits at the bottom of the ball. If I pause it here, you can see that this anchor point sits right down here at the bottom of the ball. This was done for you guys, so you guys don't have to do it yourself. It's a little bit confusing to do, so we just, especially when you're getting used to doing things inside of Cinema 4D, and so that's why we've preemptively set that up for you, so you guys don't have to change the anchor point in here. But just keep that in mind that when animating inside of Cinema 4D, you will eventually have to update anchor points, okay? So do you guys have any questions real quick about the animation inside of Cinema 4D? I'll kind of recap real quick because I know we had some hiccups and I've been trying to get back into the flow of things, and I feel like we kind of rushed through this one a little bit because we had some technical issues, but I need to get to the other section of the lesson for you. And so the first thing that we did, I'll just recap real quick, is we started with the position of the ball. We grabbed the ball and we kind of zoomed into just 1 second, which would be like this section, the first second of our animation, and we blocked out the first section, right? We first started here, we went to the center here, and then to a half second at 12 frames, and then we went to a full second at 24 frames, and we created an entire bounce, right? And then we updated the curves of that bounce. And then what happened is we went in and performed the squash and stretch of the ball. We made sure that the Z and the X scale parameters of the ball matched each other at all times, and that the Y parameter was always the one that was a little bit different, right? Because remember, when you're squashing an object, the depth and the width are going to stay the same, and really the only thing is the height that's changing. And so making sure that you're values are, when you're adding to one, you're deducting to the other is important, right? But except for that z and that x coordinates are locked to each other. So those have to be the same. And then when we did that, we noticed that, hey, the ball started squashing midair before it hit the platform. And so we had to update our position changes, right? So that the ball would hit the ground when before the squash happened, right? Right before the squash was starting to happen, we wanted the ball to make contact with the ground so that that ball could actually be affected by the platform itself. And so we had to go in there and update where we had to do what's called a hold in animation, right? We had to hold the same parameter for these few frames. What is it? 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. For 6 frames right here, we had to hold um, at our platform. We had to make sure we were down at our platform for when that entire squash happened. And then we were still getting value changes here, even though our values were 0, 0. As far as the Y position of our ball, it should have been on the platform, but it was still changing when we would scrub through here. And what we realized we had to do was go um, into the F curve graph editor and flatten that section out of the curve where the ball was on the ground, where it was on the platform, in order to allow no changing to happen during that ball hitting the ground and squashing, right? Because we don't want any Y values to happen. So when you're looking at the curves now of your keyframes, right, it should look like this as far as the position goes, right? Your position keyframes should look like this, kind of just hills, like nice hills, flowing hills with a little space. If we just click the position, let me just select the position, with a nice flat space in between each bounce. And then if we look at the scale, holding down shift, we'll select all three, and we hit H here. We can see that these curves, right, they correlate with each other. The Z and the X are going to be the same. And you just smooth those curves out. So they're nice and flowy looking. So this is what your scale curves will look like. And this is what your position curves will look like. Again, hitting H to center that for you. Okay. So this looks cool. We've got the animation down, but now we need to make it look pretty, because if we don't make it look pretty, it's boring, right? Yeah, we want it to look nice. And so I'm going to just bring my playhead. I just shrunk down our timeline area and bring my playhead back to 0 so I can see everything kind of as is. In fact, yeah, let's do that all the way to 0. We're going to add materials to these objects. Now, up here in our software, we have this little ball with a little line under it. That is our material manager. So I'm going to click on that right there. And we already have some materials set up for you here inside of Cinema 4D. And you can choose to put the materials, whatever one you want to put on each one. I suggest the solid color on the platform because it has some different ridges here, and the stripes might not add up correctly. But you can just drag and drop a material from your material manager directly onto the object inside of your scene here. And so I'm just going to click and drag these materials over here. Let's say, though, what you notice all of a sudden is when I look into my objects panel, after I've dragged my materials onto the objects, the materials show up in a little tiny tag right over here next to the object itself, which is showing that, hey, you have a material on there, right? Now, if I want to remove a material from here, all I have to do is just select that material tag and hit delete, right? And it will remove it from my object. And you don't want a ton of materials on one object in the beginning of class. Like, you can get to doing that a little bit more later. But right now, you know, it's better for your computer. It's better for your sanity to keep this area nice and clean. And so just, you know, one material at a time on an object is smart. You can also, instead of clicking and dragging onto the material directly in your scene, you can actually click and drag the material directly to your object over here in your object panel. So if this is a little bit easier, if you have a bunch of stuff happening in your scene and it's easier to just grab this and stick it right over here on, let me do this again. Grab this ball and stick it over to your object, then you can do that. And I said ball, but I meant to say material. If you were to have grabbed this and put it onto your studio, I don't know if that would have worked. Let me see there. Let me see. It did. It worked for the studio because it's just the object there. But normally you would just drag it directly to your primitive or your object, which is the stage right there. And if you double click onto these, to these materials, you're going to get a bunch of options to edit that material. This can go very in depth. I'm not fantastic at materials. I'm still learning a lot about them. But in this area, we can match up the colors to match the rest of our project, right? Because that was one thing we talked about is consistency amongst the projects. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just minimize this and open up my After Effects project so that I can see what colors I used on that ball. Let's see here. And it is opening off screen. All right, here we go. And so if I click on the ball here and I go into my effects controls, I can see that one of the stripes has this hex code right here. I want this code. I'm just going to hit make sure it's selected and hit Control C. And then I'm going to jump back over into Cinema 4D here. I'm going to go into my ball actually. And if I want to change the stripes of the ball, I actually have to go into this texture right here. You just double click. If you need to go back, you can just hit these little arrows. There's these little arrow keys up here at the top of the material editor. You can just click this to go back or forward. But when you open the ball material, under the color tab right here, there is the texture of the stripes. I'm just going to double click that, and then I'm going to click on the color and enter in the hex code, which it doesn't look like there's an area for it. So I am going to, if you click these little arrows right here, it gives you options to change the color in different ways, because you can always grab the RGB value if you want to as well. But I have a code, so I'm going to click this little decimal code right there, and then I'm going to Control V and paste that. And I'm sorry, I said decimal code, but I meant to say like the, what's it called? The number? What the heck? Hashtag. Words. Lots of words tonight. So I'm going to select on the second color. I'm going to go back to the hexadecimal color option here. And then I'm going to jump back into After Effects. I'm going to select the other brown that I grabbed. This is quite the interesting color palette, by the way. Normally don't go this way. And I'm going to copy this color right there. I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to jump back into Cinema 4D. And again, jump over to the hexadecimal color option and paste it like that. So now I have my brown, two different colored tans. And then for the platform, I'm going to grab that color, come over here. My platform is my solid. Remember this one right down here. I'm going to click this. And then I'm going to go into my layer solid settings and grab the color of my solid. Control C. All right. Looks like we're okay. Are we still good in the live stream, you guys? I haven't seen anyone talking. I know you guys are probably following along because it's a lot, but I just want to make sure everything's going smoothly. I'm going to grab the color right here and do the same thing. Change this to my platform color. There we go. And I kind of, the shininess isn't bad. You guys can keep like that, the reflectiveness in your material if you want, but I'm just going to grab this reflectance panel, and I'm actually going to probably turn it down. Let's see. I'm going to drop it down to like, let's try 5% under the layer. Let's see what else happens if I drop this down. There we go. I'm going to drop both my layer 1 reflectiveness down to 5% and then my global reflection brightness down to 25% right there. And then maybe drop that specular highlight down a little bit to 50%. So there's like a specular highlight, right? Which is this little highlight right there. And this one right here. And I'm just going to drop those down a little bit so it's just not as shiny. And then I'm going to click off there and do the same on this ball material. Grab the reflectance, drop this down to 5%, drop this to 25%, and to 50%. Again, optional for you guys, but that's what I want to do. Now, we want to export this out so that we can put it into our After Effects composition, but we need to take off of these lines, right? All right, Logan gave me the green light on there. Cool. So in order to take off these lines, in fact, if you need a reminder, if you click the notes, the README notes, and you go to note right here, it tells you what to do. You just hit N and then A. So not at the same time, right? You're going to hit N first and don't move your key. If you move your mouse like this, it'll move that menu. So if you just want to hit N and you can read all the options you have, all you have to do is hit A next and it will remove those lines for you, right? If I wanted those lines back, I would just hit NB, garage shading with the lines, and it would give me those lines back. Okay, but we're going to take those lines off. So I'm going to hit NA, and now we're going to render this out. We already pre-prepped everything in our render settings. We're just going to double check that real quick. Saving to the appropriate destination. Perfect, to the PNG sequence. We've got our alpha channel on. We're going to go to the output. 1920 by 1080, 72 resolution, which is fine. And then all frames, that's the biggest one. And then frame rate 2. So we're going to check this one, and this one. Make sure these are all appropriate. 1920, 1080, 24, all frames. And then I'm just going to close off that. And then up here, in order to render the sequence, you just hit this little slate icon with the play button there. So once I hit that, what's going to happen is my computer is going to start the process of rendering the object. You can't see it right here because I need to move the ball or move my area, like viewing area over here. But all of these little squares that you see on, well, can't really see it. My computer is very, very fast. Okay, I'm going to let you guys know that right now. My computer is doing this probably a lot quicker than most of your computers will do. Some of you might have very fast computers that allows you to do the 120 frames very quickly. It's not that crazy of an animation anyways. So there's not a lot of stuff going on except for a bouncing and a squashing and stretching. But this happened very quickly for me. It might take you guys a little bit longer, but it tells you how long it takes to render each frame inside of this list here. And then it tells you which frame it's actually on, right? So it shows you all the pictures. Now, if I close this, save my project, Control S, get used to doing that in the middle of your stuff. And then I go to my folder, Cinema 4D files, to that PNG sequence. All of a sudden I open it up and I have my sequence here and it automatically sequences everything for me. So if I start to scroll through here and click through my image, I can see that I have a bouncing ball animation, right? Well, it's all just images. So we need to composite this inside of the, oh, H works for that too. Val, sweet. Thank you for letting me know that. H seems to be like your centering option inside of Cinema 4D for when you're kind of like lost and out of control and can't see things. H seems to be the button that you hit that centers everything for you. Anyways, so jumping back into this, we want to composite this into our video with our other bouncing ball here. And so this is very important for you guys to pay attention to, right? Because there's a couple things that can go wrong here when importing our PNG sequence. The first thing that you're going to want to do is inside your assets, let's do this inside. We're going to put it inside of our assets folder, and we're going to hit Control I on our keyboard. And we are going to navigate over to the folder where our sequence is. So here, to bouncing ball, 3D, PNG sequences. And instead of grabbing all of these like images and putting them in, right? You can do that. You can grab them all and import them into your folder. Holy cow. Now all of a sudden we have 120 images that we have to worry about lining up here inside of our timeline, right? So if we were to create a main composition, let's do that real quick. Let's do main comp. We'll just say main render, right? Because this is what we're going to want to render out. Make sure it's 1920 by 1080. Oh, let's cancel that real quick. 1920, 1080. There we go. Now lock that aspect ratio. 24 frames a second. We'll do 5 seconds because each bounce is about 5 seconds long. We're going to hit OK. And we're going to drag this. We're actually going to bring the background. I'm going to shut the background off here in this composition. And we are going to bring it into the other one. So I'm going to just hit, I'm going to turn it back on, select the layer, hit Control X to cut it, and go into our main render composition and hit Control V to paste that background. So it will be there for all of our videos. And then I'm going to lock this. And now I'm going to drag in our AE ball composition, right? So we have the After Effects ball here bouncing. But now because of how I imported these images, I would have to bring these in essentially one at a time and sequence these layers so that each one is only one frame away. It's just unreasonable thing to do. It just doesn't make sense to do it that way. It's so timely and annoying, to be honest. So I'm just going to delete all of these and I'm going to import that. I'm going to select my assets folder, hit Control I, and I'm going to select the first image in our sequence. And down here, we're going to import it as a footage, right? But we need to make sure that this little option is checked, the PNG sequence right here, because if this is not checked, it won't import all of the rest of these images into essentially like a compressed folder, right? And so all you got to do, select the first one, check that, and then you hit import, and it will import it in as one layer. So then when I bring this into After Effects and I move this over to composite it, holding down Shift, I can scale this down a little bit, maybe 2, so it's about the same size. And now when I play them, why is this one only doing it once? I think I only had one bounce happening for this one. Let's see here. Yeah, you would need to copy and paste these keyframes, right? So yeah, Control C, Control V, moving over here, V, moving over here, Control V, and then we'll do 4 seconds, so you got 4 jumps, 4 bounces. And save this. We'll change the main render so that it's got 4 bounces as well. 4 seconds long, not 5. And now when I play this, the bounces happen pretty much at the same time. Oh, you know why? Something's wrong here, right? When I play this, all of a sudden our bounces should be synced up. It doesn't make sense why they're not syncing, right? In fact, we did 5 bounces, we thought, inside of Cinema 4D. This is the most important thing when you're bringing in other files that you've created outside of After Effects. You have to make sure that the frame rate, right? Even though we exported it out at 24 frames a second, when it imported here into as a PNG sequence, it imported it as 30 frames a second. And so we need to change that. How do you do that? You select your sequence and you right click on there, and you're going to go to interpret footage main. And we are going to change this. Assume this frame rate's 30. No way. We need to assume that it's 24 frames a second. And then we're going to hit OK. If you don't do that, what's going to happen is it's going to move really fast like that, and they're not going to be synced up. When you go to play it, one ball is going to be moving chaos like super fast, and the other one's not going to be keeping up with it. And so we needed to interpret that footage to be the 24 frames a second that we made it in the project. So you guys have to, that's a big one. You need to put that in your notes. The next thing that we need to do is we need to select that layer down here in our timeline, and we need to extend that clip length right here because it cut off right here at the 4 seconds. We need to just grab this little area and just drag it over. You can also hit Alt square bracket, and remember those ones, those shortcuts that I told you, those shortcuts work on this as well. So Alt square bracket, close bracket will extend that to the end if your playhead's at the end there. I'm going to save this right now because we have it all set up and ready to go. And we're going to jump right into Adobe Animate and start animating our frame by frame ball. Let's go ahead and Adobe Animate. So we have half of our video already made here. In fact, what we can do, let me see something real quick. So if I turn on, will this work? I don't think it will. No, that won't work for a 3D image layer like that. Oh, wait, wrong one. Oh, yeah. Here's another thing, you guys. When you bring in, we brought in our composition, right? So we're essentially nesting compositions here in After Effects. So we had our AE main ball, and this one has the motion blur turned on the layer on the inside here, right? It looks good. So when we're looking at that, it's got the motion blur. Well, when we created our main render composition, this one right here, and we took this AE main ball comp and we dropped it in, which is called nesting, right? Essentially, this would be a pre-comp. I can rename this AE ball underscore pre-composition. It's just like a nest, right? It's creating another folder. We're just nesting these. But when I drag this into my main composition right here, all of a sudden my motion blur went away. Well, that's because you have to make sure you turn on the motion blur on the actual layer, the pre-composition when you drag it in, right? So here's what I did. I grabbed this, I created a new composition. I have this nested one. I'm going to drag this in here into my main comp. And I need to make sure that I also turn that motion blur on to this pre-comp layer. Because if I don't, it won't have that blur. When I click off, you can see that it doesn't have that there. So you just have to make sure, little details like that, you have to make sure you're consistent across compositions when you're doing that. All right, so I'm going to hide this, and we are going to look here inside of Adobe Animate. And we've got 40 minutes left. I think we should be able to get this done. When you open Adobe Animate, it'll have like a pop-up, right, that tells you can learn stuff. You can click off of that. And we're going to hit New File here. And when we hit new file, it's going to give us a very similar option to like if we do in Illustrator or Photoshop, right? And it's going to ask us, what do we want it at? Well, we can hit full HD, which is 1920 by 1080. And then you're going to go to create. Don't do that. Okay. Frame rate. We need to check our frame rate. When we were talking about traditional animation, we talked about how when you're drawing it, you don't want to draw 24 frames, right? We want to draw 12 frames a second because it's much faster and more efficient for us to draw 12 images versus drawing 24 or 30. And it doesn't always look right when you're hand drawing traditional at that 30 frame rate. I mean, it still looks good, but you usually have to be pretty good at it. So, but when we're doing this one, you want to make sure that you're at 1920 by 1080, and we're going to drop this one to 12 frames a second, okay? Because we're going to interpret this footage once we bring this into After Effects. We're going to change the way it works, and we're going to hit create here. And the first thing that you're going to notice is it looks a lot similar to After Effects, unable to multiply transform. Okay, I'm not sure if that will become an issue later. But right away, what we notice is it looks a lot like Adobe Illustrator or inside of After Effects. In fact, some of you might be more familiar with this. But we have a toolbar menu on the left-hand side. We have some property panels and stuff and asset panels on the right-hand side. You have down at the bottom your timeline right here, right? Which also looks like there's keyframes, right? These little separators right here. And you have your scene set up, your area where you can draw into. The first thing that we want to do is we want to smart save our file so that we can save it as we go. So I'm just going to click save as, and I am going to go to my bouncing ball project. And I don't have a folder for this. What can I do? I'm just going to pop one in there, right? I'm just going to hit new folder. I'm going to just type 07 underscore AN for Adobe Animate, right? It's okay that it's not in the order, what do I want to say, like alphabetical order right here. You can always change that later, add this in if you want to your template. But we're going to go ahead and click here, and we're going to save this flash file, Macara hand-drawn ball. And I'm just going to hit save. All right. So the first thing you guys want to look at are your paintbrush options here. So there's a fluid brush, right, which allows you to kind of draw nice and fluidly. And when you click on this, it has, I think it has like a bunch of little areas around it. So it's almost like an object with a fill already on it versus this brush right here, which is going to just leave you a line. So you would have to complete an image and then actually come in here, click your fill tool, and you'd click on here to fill, right? So the drawing's kind of similar to Microsoft Paint if you guys have ever done that in the past. Let's go ahead and clear these out. Now, this first brush here uses your graphics processor, it uses your GPU, and so it's kind of a little bit intense. Some computers might be able to run this using the fluid brush tool, some might not, and so you have to use the classic brush tool. That's fine. It's okay. It's not a big deal. Either way, you're going to be able to draw with either one of those tools. And so I happen to have a drawing tablet in front of me, just a little one. Nothing fancy. It's just like a small little black Wacom tablet. Doesn't even have a screen on it or anything. You guys probably won't have one of these, and so you might have to use your mouse. It is okay. It's not a big deal if the ball isn't a perfect circle. Try and do your best to make it look as nice as possible, right? Because these are going into a portfolio. But we want to, just be conscious of that I'm just using a drawing tablet here, so my circles might look like I'm doing that a little bit easier, but that's because I'm not using a mouse. My circles will not be perfect. I will let you know that right away. I'm going to increase my timeline down here. And then I'm just going to grab my blob brush tool and maybe I want to make some changes to the settings of this tool real quick. So I'm just going to go into the properties panel right up here, and I'm selected on the tool option, and I can change my fill color because the first thing I want to do is create a guideline. I'm gonna pick this red. And we want to create a layer guideline for our animation where we can section off different areas that will represent keyframes, right? And you'll see what I'm talking about here in a second, but they will help us to determine where we need to draw our ball. And this is really important when it comes to traditional animation, drawing these guidelines, right? Whether a guideline looks like this and it has lines here representing your first and last keyframe. And then remember spacing, the closer things are spaced, the slower the motion, the further things are apart, the faster the motion, right? And so getting these guidelines set up really helps you when it comes to motion um, with traditional animation. The first thing that, so we've got our brush. I just changed the color over here. The size is okay. We'll just do 10. We'll just change that back to 10. I don't want my pressure to affect the pressure of my drawing tablet. If you have a drawing tablet, that can change the um like tapering of your pen, and we don't want that. So I'm going to actually bring this all the way up to 100%. Yeah, you can also do that. We can actually probably do that. It'll probably save us a lot more time too. So if you want the traditional hand-drawn look, you guys can draw these like this, right? But if you want to create, you can come in here and you create a shape using a shape tool. Holding down shift, you will get like a perfect shape circle. And once you select the shape here, let me see, where's the anchor point? Okay, perfect. You select this transform tool here. So this is a little bit different. This is a free transform tool. This is more your selection tool. When you click on the free transform tool and you have your object selected, you can grab and I think you can grab and move the anchor point on your object here. Holding down shift, I can drag that to the bottom so that now when I go to scale my object or change the size of my object, it changes from where the anchor point is right here. So we'll do a couple different ones. We'll do one with a nice perfect circle, and then we'll do one with a different one. But before we do that, before we start drawing stuff, let's kind of set up our layers here in order to do that. So we've got one layer here. I'm going to need this guide layer. And I'm going to add another 2 layers here. We'll do hand drawn. Oh, come on. I don't think you can do space. That's why I did it. You can't use space in these because as soon as, oh no, it did work. I don't know why that happened. Special characters are not permitted. So it was you can't do a space. It has to be like an underscore. And then we're going to do shape object ball. Come on now. Underscore ball. It's a pain, but here we are. All right, so we need to put a keyframe down here for this guide layer that we want to create that's going to go all the way to the end of our animation. So let's the first thing you need to do is you can't really just start drawing and entering keyframes. You have to manually put the keyframe layer down here on your layer. You have to actually manually add it to your timeline. So we're going to go ahead and click we're going to go, I think we can move let's drag this all the way to 24 seconds right here. Now we're going to go to our 24th frame, 2 seconds right here. We're going to just kind of click and drag to highlight these little box areas. And then I'm going to right click on here and I'm going to insert a keyframe. One single keyframe. And you can tell it's one single keyframe because it's one long rectangular shape instead of a bunch of little tiny squares on here. When it's a bunch of little tiny squares, it will be a separate keyframe for each frame, right? But when it's one long rectangular shape right here, that means it's one single image that'll last the entire time. So now, what does that mean? If I draw my guide on this layer, again, holding down Shift will help you draw straight lines. Let's go ahead over here. I'm going to hold down Shift. I'm going to click and I'm going to draw. It's going to take a second. I've got a nice straight line, and that straight line will appear in every single frame. All right. As I move from, as I scrub my playhead through, right, until it ends here on the 20. We actually need it to go one more frame ahead. So how do I do that one? Extend that keyframe. Insert frame there. Extend that one. Let me see. I'm not as clear that keyframe. There we go. 25th one. We don't need that one. We want that one cleared. Right click, clear, cut frame. That one right there. All right. So you can't exactly click on things and hit Control C, Control V, or delete or anything like that. You actually have to, I'm not privy to all of the shortcuts inside of Adobe Animate, but if you right click, you can see all the shortcuts here next to the options. But you can learn to do those. You have to, your shortcuts are a little bit different than they are inside of the other Adobe programs. So you just need to memorize those as you go and it'll make you faster. If not, you just right click on these and you can cut your keyframes, you can clear your keyframes, you can delete them, so on and so forth. And so on this one, we want to have a, essentially the guide that's going to show us what we need to, in fact, I don't know why let's change the fill color of this. I had it at red, but it changed, probably because I grabbed something else, and I do not want a stroke. I think this will work. Okay, yeah. So I'm just gonna hold down Shift, click here, undo that. Wrong. Click here, delete that. Let's start again. Holding down Shift, just draw a nice straight line. And we're going to draw a line at the top here, holding down Shift. Oh, it's a little bit funny. Holding down Shift right here. And so this is going to represent our keyframe at the top of our bounce. So this is essentially like 1, and this is the keyframe at the bottom of the bounce. So we'll count to that in a second. And we're going to use the rule of thirds here. Now, normally you would think you would just start cutting this in half, right? But remember, we want to group the frames, the drawings, closer to the top where the ball is decelerating on the way up. So that slow motion is going to kind of happen right here. And then that ball's going to accelerate on the way down. And so we want this quick motion to be here. So when it comes to spacing and drawings, remember that the closer the drawings are together, the slower the motion, the further the drawings are apart, the faster the motion. And so we're going to start dividing this area into thirds. So I'm going to start over here. I'm going to divide this whole thing into 1/3. Right about here. So like 1/3, 2/3, right? And so then this section right here, I'm going to divide into thirds again. Holding down Shift. Cool. And then this section right up here. So as I move up, I start taking these upper sections and just dividing them into thirds. And we'll count how many we have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frames. Let's do 6 right here. We'll do 7. Oh, hold on. Oh, got something that came up over this side. And then I drew up there too. Let's do this real quick. Right there. Right there. And then right about there. Right? I mean, this area is a little bit, but we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's add another one up here. Let's kind of erase these numbers. We want to get to 9 frames. Let me increase the size of my eraser. Just erasing that. That was my 1. I was like, what is that? It's a terrible looking one. We're going to just add one more line right in here. So then we can have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 frames on our guide. And then we're going to hold here for about 6 frames. And then we're going to go back up, right? So we're going to stick to the ground, kind of like we just did with the Cinema 4D ball. And then we're going to shoot back up into the air. So I'm going to take this guide and I'm going to actually grab it. Can I grab it with this tool? Nope, wrong one. This one. Grab this guide, move it all, holding shift over here. I can leave the numbers there. That's not a big deal. But now let's go ahead and put our ball to these. Let me click off of that. We're going to put, sorry guys, between, I've got a lot of stuff on my desk, so just had to move a couple things. My mouse was getting held down. What we're going to do now is we're going to draw the ball over these lines, like the center part of these lines, so that we can use this as a guide as where the ball needs to be placed. The first thing I need to do is initiate keyframes down here, right? So I need to highlight this area. And instead of inserting one single keyframe like I did before, right? Before I hit this one, you need to convert to keyframes, which is F6 here, which is going to convert each one of them to separate keyframes. Convert to keyframes. You notice that, right? Because we have each separate little square here versus this one right here, which is one big singular square. And we're going to do the same for this shape object right up here. Just select these, right click, convert to keyframes. Oh, I have an extra one right here that I don't need. I'm just going to clear that frame. And oh, let me see here. I think there's a remove frame. Remove that one, and we're going to remove this one as well. Now you notice I am moving 2 seconds along, right? So I've got 1 second, which is right here, if you look at your timeline, and we can zoom in and out of the timeline using the, hey, Bell, where's, oh, right up here. Perfect. The zooming in option, right? We can zoom in and out this way. I don't know if you can still use Control plus and minus allows you to zoom into your scene. This area right here, though, I'll have to figure out the shortcut for this. We're just going to zoom in nice and tight so you guys can see kind of what's happening more. And so each one of these has its own separate frame that we're going to do. And we're going to pretty much go to frame 9, right? So right about here, we're going to have the ball drawn, and then we're going to stick to the ground. What's 9 and 9 is 18. So then frame 16, 17, 18, for about 6 frames, I think it'll be. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, until we get to frame 15, and then we should have about 9 frames left, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So the ball's going to hit the ground at 9 frames, right? Because it's going to go all the way down, hit the ground at the 9th frame. We're going to stick to the ground for 6 frames. And then from the 15th frame onto the 24th frame, the ball's going to go back up into the air. All right, so it's going to take place over 2 seconds, but when we bring this into After Effects, it's going to look nice and fluid once we interpret the footage into 24 frames a second. So let's kind of start here. I'm actually going to duplicate this guide and move it over here so we can have two kind of options, right? One here, one here. Because we're going to do two different balls, right? We're going to do, in fact, let me zoom out of this, grab them both, grab this one, keep that here, and then this section of numbers will move over here on this side. And then we'll grab them both and kind of center them in our, all of it. Let's grab all of it. Come on, use your, yep, there we go. Right about there. That looks good. Numbers got cut off there, but we know what's happening. And so on this one, right here, the shape object layer, I'm going to draw a shape. And let's pick a different color. Over here on the right-hand side, we can choose kind of that brown color, I guess, that we had, right? Let's get to kind of this color. I'm going to start with, I'm going to hold down Shift on my keyboard. I'm going to just draw a little ball. And notice when I did that, down here, all of a sudden this went from kind of blank looking to a little solid square with a dot. That means that I have a keyframe on there. I have like an actual frame drawn. There's something on there. And I'm just going to line this up. I'm just going to hit, what is this one? Q. Q is to grab that transform tool. Just bring this up a little bit here. And it would be beneficial if I could see what I did previously on the frame before when I go to the next frame, right? Because I want to see kind of overlapping where I'm going and where I've been. This is called onion skinning. This was a technique used back in the day by traditional animators where they would draw on transparent paper, like kind of sketching paper, and they would flip back and forth, but they could see the previous drawing underneath so they could determine what they were going to draw next. Now, in order to turn on onion skinning, it is this option right down here, right? And so we're going to click that on. And once we do that, you're going to see this little area right here that shows up, that shows for 3 frames. It's going to show me what's going on. It's going to show me like a reference of the previous image, right? Well, I'm just going to, you can click and drag and extend this. I'm just going to make it to 4 frames so that I can see the last 4 drawings as I move forward. And then also I want to loop the playback when I start to test this out and see my animation. And so I want to just click on loop playback right here so that it will loop my entire playback from 0 frames to 24 frames a second. So you just have to drag that playback area out. And whenever I go to play this, it will just continuously go over and over. And so I've got the ball drawn. Let's grab this transform tool right there and move the anchor point. Okay. Just have to make sure we do this first. Holding down Shift. Let's do this again. And drag that down to the bottom there. And so now I want to move forward. Let's do the ball first. Let's do the hand-drawn ball at the same time. And so over here, I'm going to grab my blob brush tool and I'm going to draw this ball right there. I'm not going to be all sorts of crazy with this one because we're limited time with this one. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to move forward on my timeline. If I hit period or comma, the period key or the comma key on my keyboard, it will move ahead frames or back frames, right? I can move 1 frame forward or however many frames back. And so I'm just going to hit period, and then I'm going to start to draw another ball right here. When drawing these, remember that you want to maintain the same what do I want to say? The same mass or volume. Hold on one second. My program selected off of this. As the ball as you're going down, right? So I'm going to do that. And then for this one, I'm just going to select the transform tool again, grab the shape object ball, and I'm going to, I guess with this one, do I have to extend the frame? Let me see. I can copy the frame and paste it. So Control Alt C to copy, Control Alt V to paste. I think I could do that. Let's try that one. Control Alt C to copy, move forward, Control Alt V to paste. That did not work. Do you have to select this one? Control Alt V. There we go. That's what you have to do. So if you're going to copy and paste them, you have to select the one that you're going to copy and then select the blank frame that you want to paste it on. And then we have to move this down, right? So we're going to drop this down a little bit. And then I'm going to move forward. I'm in fact going to do it with just this one because it's going to be much quicker and we're limited on time. And I'm going to Control Alt C to copy, Control Alt V to paste. So you guys can do either option with these. You can do the hand drawn. It'll be the same concept here, except you're drawing it by hand. And then I need to drag this down a little bit to meet this third frame right there. And then I need to, let me just hide this one right there so I'm not seeing that side. And then I'm going to Control Alt C to copy and move forward one frame, Control Alt V to paste. Selecting that, paste it, dragging it down here a little bit further now. Control Alt C to copy, grab this one, Control V to paste, drag it down to this line. Now we're on frame 6. We're going to start squashing this object now, right? Or stretching it out. So we're going to Control Alt C to copy, select the next frame, Control Alt V to paste. We're going to start, going to bring that anchor point down. You got to make sure that anchor point is starting to go down. We're going to just kind of start to bring this in a little bit. Let's zoom in a little bit more here and be able to get more fine-tuned. And then we're going to, remember when we go down, we need to go up in the same way to keep the volume. I'm going to hold this down and center the ball, right? Not the anchor point, but the ball where the 6th frame is. And then I'm going to copy this frame, Control Alt C to copy, move to the next one, select this, Control Alt V to paste, drag this down to the position, holding down Shift. I'm going to bring this down here, my anchor point, and I'm going to stretch this out a little bit more. All right. And then we're going to copy this one, Control Alt C, select the next frame, Control Alt V. We're going to drag this down, holding down Shift. We're going to, cool. Holding down the space bar allows your cursor will turn into a little hand, and you can click and drag around your scene to navigate around your scene, right? So we're going to just make sure these are lined up again, and it's going to stretch out again. So let's move this back down here, stretch it out even further. Make sure it goes in a little bit more. And then we're going to Control Alt C and copy that and move to here. Control Alt V to paste it. And we're going to bring that down, holding down Shift to the ground. In fact, because I've been centering everything anyways, I want to make sure I'm centering that. And then this is where the squashing is going to start. So we need to actually, which one we should be pasting. Let's clear this one. Clear keyframe. Let's copy this first one. Control Alt C, select this keyframe here. Control Alt V. And let's move back up here. Drag this down to the bottom because this is going to start squashing out, right? Holding down Shift right there. So we get about the same right here. Drag down the anchor point and let's start to go like this. Remember, we expand out, we got to drop down. Okay. And so if we start to, if we zoom out of our thing here and we go frame by frame, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, we see this ball squishing. It kind of holds here for an extra second, which it doesn't need to do because this is our 9th frame. So I actually need to remove that frame. There we go. I just had an extra keyframe in there. So if we turn off our onion skinning and I kind of look at the ball, it's going to go down, it's going to stretch out, it's going to hit the ground, and it's going to squash. And now we want it to hold for 6 frames. So let's count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And on the 7th frame right here, we're going to actually work backwards. So we're going to Control C and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th frame here. I'm going to Control Alt V so that we can start working our way backwards, right? So then I'm going to go to the next one, Control Alt C, click here, Control Alt V, and then this is going to kind of be more perfect. Control Alt C, Control Alt V. So it's essentially working its way backwards, right? Move to, we did the 3rd one. We're going to do this one, Control Alt C, Control Alt V. This is just a quicker way of animating, but it's not going to give you that hand drawn frame by frame. Let's see, 5th, Control Alt C. Look to it. You guys can do that. You'll just have to manually start drawing the squashing. Okay, hold on, this one. Copy, paste to the next frame. We have 3 more, right? So this one, copy. It's a little bit, paste. Second one, copy, paste, and then we need to insert a frame here. Convert to keyframe. And then we're going to just copy the last one, or the first frame to the last. So we have this animation. If we play it now, we play this, it's going to bounce down. It's going to bounce down, go back up, right? So these blank keyframes right here are going to be the frames that hold on the ground. And so I'm going to actually copy this one and paste it here. But I'm going to elongate. I'm going to start squashing this out, right? It's going to get real squashed while it's here. Let me undo, go back into this so you can get a little bit closer, look at it, get more into these minute changes. I'm going to move over one. I'm going to copy this, paste it on the next one, Come on. There we come on. Why you not paste? Copy. Paste. I might have pasted a different one. Nope. Let's turn on the onion skinning back on. Let's go to the next one. We're gonna copy this one, Control C, then go to the next one, Control Alt V, and we're gonna squash it out even further. Drop it down a little bit more. We're gonna copy this, Control Alt C, Control Alt V, and we're actually gonna start to go back in. So we need to go back up. You can also copy and paste those other ones you did, but this is just easier for me to do it this way. Control Alt C, move to this one, Control Alt V. And again, you're going to use the same techniques except for copy and pasting keyframes. You can, I guess, when you get to the second half where the ball is bouncing up. But the biggest thing is that you don't want to, when you're drawing this, you just want to retain the same volume throughout everything. And you can actually exaggerate the way that the ball is shaped a little bit more when you're hand drawing it, which looks really cool. It looks a little bit different than this is going to look in the end. I'm going to Control Alt C. This is going to look more vectorized, right? It's going to look more like what we do inside of After Effects. I'm going to shorten this one a little bit more and elongate it now because it's getting ready to go back up. And then there we go. Okay. So now if I move out of here and I turn off my onion skinning right over here, and I know we're hitting time, so you guys can stay with me if you want to, or you can hop off, whatever you guys need to do. And then I play this. See, the ball's going to go down to the ground. It's going to squish, and it's going to come back up. Squish. Comes back up. So we have this bouncing ball inside of Adobe Animate with squash and stretch. And again, if you wanted to do this with the hand-drawn ball, you can absolutely do that by just going frame by frame and drawing them in, right? So I started with this one. We're going to turn the onion skinning back on, and I'm just going to roughly do it real quick for you guys. So I'm going to grab the brush tool right over here, and we're going to move a frame ahead. And so we're on the third frame, so I want to make sure I draw the ball like right here. And then the next frame, oh, let's see here. Make sure that I'm actually on this and not, you want to make sure that you're on the correct layer, right? So I'm going to actually lock this guide layer so I can't grab it, and I'm going to lock the ball layer too. And I'm going to grab this layer here, and then I'm going to start drawing again. So I'm going to draw this one right here, and then I'm going to go to the next frame, and I'm going to draw it here, and I'm going to start to elongate this out here, and then the next one I'm going to get here, kind of remaining that shape. The next one I'm going to go like this. Oh, it's a little too big. Skinnier. It's getting a little big as far as volume goes, right? I noticed that. Right here. This one's going to be the floor one, or it's going to actually, let me kind of go back to the original. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, where it'll stay. But then this next one, it's going to start to go back up. So this one, actually, we need to leave that on the floor, right? Back more to the original shape. The next one, it's going to go be nice and long. The next one, it's going to be long, a little bit smaller. And then the next one, let's go here. It's going to start to get less elongated. It's going to start to squash back up. The next one. the next one, next one, next one. Oh, I'm getting small. And then the next one, right? Our perfect circle. And then we can fill in these squashing ones, right? So right down here, we can do, maybe it's starting to look like this more. And then the next one, it's looking like this, more like a pancake. And then the next one, it starts to kind of flare out to look like a bean. And then the next one, it's starting to go back to its original shape. And the next one, oh, let's get back. It's kind of skinny again. And then the next one, the final one right here, is going to be back at its like original shape. I grabbed a different tool, accidentally hit a different one right there. And so now if I turn off the onion skinning, I shut off the guide, and now I play this one, you're going to have a ball, squish, going down and squishing and staying on the ground. Okay, so, and you guys don't have to like color these in, each one in with the pen tool. You can actually just grab this fill tool right here and click on each one of these. So I can just easily run through from frame one, hitting period and moving through my image here, and just filling this in with my fill tool, with my paint bucket tool, right? And you'd obviously want to take a lot more time than I did here. I'm just trying to rush through. We had some of those technical issues and wanted to get through this real quick for you guys. And then I want to show you guys how to composite real quick and just export out. So now we have like this full animated 2D ball hand drawn. You can draw little lines that go through here as well, that go along with this, like little speed lines if you want to. You would just have to add a new layer, and then you would want to fill, again, highlight. What you do is you highlight all of these, and then you right click and you go to convert to keyframes, F6, right? And then you'll just go over each one of these and you can draw little speed lines over the, if I were to grab this, change the color. I don't know what color. I'll just grab blue. And you were to go back from this and you can start off you can start off longer, but the ones behind, right, you'd want to be shorter. Because again, this is similar to smears, where it is essentially emulating speed. And you'll want to take much more time than I am. These will get longer. And then this one will start to flare out. All right. And then so on and so forth. And you can do that and you'll get like these looking kind of thing. And so I would definitely add those in there. I think it sells speed. But let's go ahead and export this out. I know I'm kind of rushing through this and I know it's late. So I appreciate you guys waiting. But let's pause this right here. And we're going to Control S to save. And you can export in a couple of different ways. Here you just go to export and export your movie, I believe. Actually, no, let's not do that one. It's export file, export image. Is this it? I feel like it's changed. Optimize original. Okay, it was video media. I was just grabbing the wrong one. So you go to File, Export, and then to video media. And you want to make sure you click ignore stage color because that's going to ignore the white background that we don't want. And we're going to export this entire scene. You want to make sure that you shut off your guide layer too, right? You can either delete it or you can just hide it like that. And we want to pick a spot where this is going to save to. Let's go desktop, GCC, ball bouncing, Adobe Animate. Let's save new folder, and we'll to animate output, right? Because that will save. That's where we're outputting our file to. Let's save that. I thought you can do, you want to go to a PNG sequence, or you can do, yeah, do a PNG sequence. I don't know about a movie. But we want to select the PNG sequence. Again, ignore that entire movie PNG sequence with alpha. That's the other thing you need to do is you need to select, make sure that you're selecting your PNG sequence with the alpha source, and you're going to hit export. And then that's going to export that out. And we're going to minimize that, and we're going to go into, it's going to export it through Adobe Media Encoder, which is how we export all of our videos. It's just opening it off to the side for me. Again, appreciate you guys staying in here. It looks like it actually did it with the, I need to redo it, and I want to shut this off. Let me see. We're going to turn that into a guide layer. If you right click and turn it into a guide layer, then it shouldn't show up on your actual render, because what I noticed is that it is actually showing up on the render when I go into the folder where my sequence is under Adobe Animate. They all have the guides, and we don't want that, so I'm going to grab those and delete them, and we're going to do this over again, right? So turn that into a guide layer, file, export, video, media, ignore stage color, change to PNG, make sure that you've got PNG with alpha, and then make sure you're adding it to the thing, to the specific folder. Then you're going to export it, and then Media Encoder is going to export that for you. Okay, it was just telling me it successfully created that. And now we're going to do the same thing inside of After Effects, right? So we're going to go to our assets folder. We're going to hit Control I to import. And we're going to go back to the folder where our sequence is. We're going to select, I have two. You should only have one ball drawn. Okay, so pick either the hand draw one or the one with the shape. And then make sure that you have PNG sequence selected. And we're going to hit import. And then we're going to, we would normally drag this in here, right? But look, our FPS is wrong in here. So when I drag this in, let's see what happens, what it looks like. It's going to look really weird, too fast. It's going to look way too fast. So we need to interpret the footage. I think with this one, we're going to do 24 frames a second. Where is it? Yes. And then if I drop it in, let me see what happens if I interpret it differently. Is it 12? Because we only did a 1 second. If we do it this way, it unsyncs and it looks weird. So it has to be interpreted at 24 frames a second. Main 24. And you can make sure that this is always interpreting it at 24 if you go to interpret footage and remember interpretation. If you click that, then it's going to interpret everything at 24 frames a second. And then I am just going to take this, and we're actually going to pre-compose it into its own composition. So I'm going to hit Shift Control C inside of After Effects, and I'm just going to type hand drawn underscore pre-comp, right? We're just adding it into its own separate folder. I'm going to hit OK. And then I'm going to double click this, and we're actually going to extend it out. The composition, right? Because it only goes to 1 second. And according to our main render, we need it to be 5 seconds long. So we're going to go into this hand-drawn pre-comp. We're going to hit Control K. We're going to change the time, the duration, just to 5 seconds. And then we are going to zoom out of here so we can see the entire timeline. And we're going to duplicate this. And we're going to make sure that when we're dragging it back up here, that we're perfectly aligned, like from one to the other, butted right up next to each other with the layers, your PNG sequence, nice and butted up next to each other. So I'm going to go right to 2 seconds there, and I'm going to drag in this hand-drawn ball comp again and move that over here so it lines up exactly at the 2 seconds. I'm going to do it again, duplicate, Control D, move this over, then move over to 4 seconds, Control D, and then move this over here. So now I have a fully looping hand-drawn animated ball that's bouncing, right? So once I come back in here, I've got this pre-comp. Let me change the color that I've created that I need to extend out to the fully 5 seconds here, right? So that it can play. And all of my balls bounce at the same speed, right? And so normally I'd probably want one of these or the other. I'm going to put this one over here, right? So that they're kind of all lined up with each other. And now we have 3 bouncing balls that happen. This one pauses. Where does this pause happen? Okay, so this one needs to be, I need to make sure I do one more. I need to copy this one more time, which is this right here. Copy, because I shorten this. Paste, extend that, save this, Control S. Let's close these pre-comps out. And now I have them bouncing. I have 5 bounces happening over 5 seconds right here. And let's finish this up. Let's add a title real quick. And we should be good in the next 10 minutes. Okay, guys? So I'm going to grab all of these balls and I'm going to pre-compose all of these, right? Not the background, just all of the balls together. And I'm going to say 3 ball pre-comp. And I'm going to hit OK. And that just allows me to have less, less, excuse me, layers in my composition here. It just keeps it nice and clean. And then if I need to move this around, I can for any reason. But you want to make sure you turn that blur on again, just in case. And we're going to add the titles into here. So I'm going to hit Control K on my keyboard, and we're going to extend this for maybe another 2 seconds. This main composition. So the main comp's going to be about 7 seconds long. And I'm just going to drag this to, oh, did I do it wrong? Let's see here. I did it wrong here. I typed in 2, but I need it to be 7 seconds right there. And I'm going to drag this main composition that I have here to the 2 second mark because I just added 2 seconds, which is where my title's going to go. And then I just wanted to drag this pre-comp over here so that all of the bounces will still occur within the 5 seconds for the rest of the composition. In fact, I needed to zoom out because I was very zoomed in like there. So I need to zoom out all the way. And this background layer right here, I'm going to change the color, needs to be extended all the way to the end of my composition. You guys got to make sure you're checking that, right? That you're not zoomed into your timeline, that you zoom out all the way. And then I moved this all the way to the 2 second on my timeline. And I'm going to go ahead and put my title in here. So I'm going to say ball bounce. And just any kind of sans serif font. So nothing with the little feet on it. Just use something very nice and clean and nothing too crazy for this, because the crazier it looks, the more distracting it is. And I'm just going to change the font size here. I'm going to click on my pan behind tool to center the anchor point in the middle of my text. And then I'm going to go to my align panel over here and align the text to the middle of my composition. And I want to fade this title in and then fade it out. So let's change the layer color. And if I were to go into my effects and presets here on this side and I type in fade, fade in and fade out, there's usually an option here. Let's see here. Let's just do fade up words. We'll do that because it'll fade each word in, right? And I'm going to drop that onto my layer. And I'm going to hit U on my keyboard because it should, on that layer, it should bring up some keyframes here where the effect happens, right? And I'm actually going to shorten this to 12 frames, so a half a second, right? I'm going to shorten that time right there. So now it fades on within the first 12 frames. And I actually want it to fade off here, right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit T on my keyboard and I'm going to keyframe the opacity at 100. And then I'm going to move to this 2-second mark where the balls show up and I'm going to go to 0. Okay. And so now the title's going to fade in, it's going to fade out, and then the balls show up and they start bouncing for the entire 7 seconds of video, right? All this work for 7 seconds. And now we need to export this. Okay, we've got a title on here, it fades on, it fades off, and then we have the animation. I'm going to move this keyframe just over a little bit. Right there. Make sure it's on that too. But we need to export this out to its final destination, right? We don't want to, so we're not going to be turning in this After Effects file. We need to turn in a finalized render. And so I'm actually going to change this color to white to get it to look nice. What we need to do is up here, in order to export it out, we go to our composition, and then you're going to go to add to media encoder queue. We just talked about the media encoder. That is the program here that helps us to essentially like create the video, right? And so these two things right here were the Animate sequences that I had created, and they've got a little green check mark next to it because those are completed. I'm just going to delete those. It's going to ask me if I'm sure. I'm going to say yes. And now this one is this main render right here. Before we get to this, let me make sure you guys know something. When you're going to render out a sequence, you have to make sure that this playback area, your work area, is extended all the way to the end of wherever your animation ends, okay? Because if it's shortened, it will not render out that section. So you want to make sure that you're not only in this section, but you're in the composition that you want rendered out, right? Because if I were in my pre-comp, my hand-drawn pre-comp, and I went to render, it's just going to render out this when I want it to render out this composition. So you have to make sure you're in the appropriate composition. And then we are going to go to composition, add to media encoder. Media encoder is going to open. I'm going to close Adobe Animate real quick so my computer just has plenty of thinking power. And we are going to change this over here, the preset. Oh, it added another one. I'm just going to delete the other one I did, the older one. And down here, we have a bunch of preset options in the lower left-hand corner. I'm just going to go in here and type in YouTube. All you got to do is type U and this pops up. And I'm going to select the 1080p full HD option here. And it's going to pop this one up right there. I'm just going to delete this duplicate one right there. And we want to make sure that when you're rendering it, that it's an H.264, which equals an like an MP4. It's just a coding, like an encoding code. And that your preset here is the YouTube 1080p full HD. You can also just click it like this and you can do this and click it down there. And then here, the output file, if you click this link, will tell you where it's going to render that video to. And so we want to go into our, we went to our desktop, to the GCC folder, to where we needed to go into our project. And I'm going to go under renders, and I'm just going to hit save here under, I'm going to change the name to Makara underscore bouncing balls. And I'm going to save this. And then I'm going to hit the little play button up here. And that play button is going to start to do all this crazy stuff down here. It's connecting to a dynamic link server. And what it's going to do is it's going to encode my video as an MP4. And once it's done, it'll give you that little green check mark. And I'm just going to click on there and it's going to open it in the folder for me. And then notice now it says .mp4. So now we have a finalized video. And this video is what you are going to submit to me via Canvas, right? Just this video. You're going to make sure that there's 4 total bounces, at least 4 to the balls. And that there's 3 balls, right? You have one that was done in Adobe Animate, one that was done in Adobe After Effects, and one that was done inside of Cinema 4D. You want to make sure that all of the colors over the whole thing are very consistent. I know that last one I did in Adobe Animate is kind of crazy, but just making sure that everything's really consistent, and watch your video over before you submit it into Canvas. I can't tell you how many times that people have submitted on like videos with a bunch of black frames, right? You want to make sure that this goes all the way to just the end of your composition here, and it doesn't have a bunch of extra black footage at the end, right? So make sure that you're watching the playback of your animation before you render it. And again, I'll just quickly go over this. To render, make sure you're in the appropriate composition that you want to export. You go to composition, add to media encoder queue. It will open up your media encoder, which I don't know why I closed, but I did. Right here. Just give it a second and then it'll generate the composition that you asked it to export for you. Right there. You're going to either type in YouTube here, or you can do the drop down here and search for the YouTube 1080p full HD. You're going to change the location that you want it to export that to, and make sure you update your name on the MP4. And then you're going to save it, and then you're going to hit play button, and that's going to render that out for you. And then you're going to rewatch your video back, and then you're going to submit it to me. Okay, so make sure that there's motion blur on the middle ball, that you have a title in here, that you have at least 4 bounces, and that you also have a consistent color palette going on. I'm sure several of you have dropped out of the video. I know it was very long today, and we had some like kind of chaotic things happening, which I apologize for. But do you guys have any questions before I end the live stream and let you guys go on with your day? The rest of your weekend? Whew, I feel like I was flying through that and talking a lot very fast. If there are no questions, then I'm going to say goodnight to you guys. And I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. And in fact, I just got an answer about the Cinema 4D issue. If you guys, whoever's having issues with their Cinema 4D, if you email me If you send me your email or just say, hey, it's me, I will forward your email to someone, and they're going to get you in touch with a Maxon rep that we work with the school. No other questions. Definitely need to relook the videos. Yeah. Cool. All right, guys, have a good night. I'll leave an announcement on there about the long video, but have a good weekend, you guys. Ask me any questions in Discord if you need, but I will talk to you all later. Bye.